So let's go ahead and learn how to work with strings in JavaScript. Strings are what we call objects. And objects are made from a class. And when you look at the class, that is not the object, but it defines what the object would look like someday. And when the object is created, then that object can have attributes or properties, and they describe the object. Another thing an object has are methods, and those are functions within the object. In other words, they can do work, and they can do whatever you really want, but they're called methods. And the last thing an object has is an event handler, and it responds to things. So if we take a look at this screen, it's just a basic HTML page, and go ahead and type all this in. You can pause the video, type it in. Now that you've typed that in, it will look, and in the head section we have a script tag, and in that script tag we have some source code. That source code is a function, just a regular function. It does work, and this function is called testString. And it creates a variable called sFirstName, and that's going to be a string variable. And in other words, it's an object. And there's going to be special things we can do with that object. This object, this variable called sFirstName, says go out to the DOM, the document object model, which goes and creates an object for every single HTML tag and builds a hierarchy. Sort of like a family tree. In the HTML, which is at the very top, it will have two branches, one for head, one for body. In the body branch, it'll have a label object and an input object and BR objects and button objects and P objects for that P tag. And I have a typo there I need to fix. And under the head object, we don't really have any other tags, just the script, but we could have a title tag. And all these things are part of the DOM, the document object model. And so this says, go out to the DOM, the document, the HTML document, and go try to find an element that has the name, the ID of name1. And so we look at all these different tags, and we say, do you have an ID called name1? And here it is right here. And so this part of the code goes and grabs this object, which is an input box. And that input box object has an attribute called value. And so by saying dom.value, you can say grab the value or the contents of that input box found on the document object model. And so whatever we had typed into this box will get returned to that variable. So let's see how this works. And then what we do is we say go out to the DOM and go find an object that has the ID of output, which is right here. It's a P tag. And go to its inner HTML, which is right there, right in between those two P tags, and I can put something there. For instance, I could do this. I could say double quote hello space plus sign concatenation sFirstName, and then we take that value and assign it to the P tag object with the ID of output, and that's how you can link this P tag to the DOM and access attributes for that object. Let's just run it and see what happens here. So if I type the first name of Mickey and do a click me, it says hello Mickey. Control-Shift-I, and the source is here, and that's because it said if you ever click on that button, the click me button, go find a function called testString. And it found that testString function, And then it said, go out to the DOM, find a tag, an HTML tag with the ID of name1, which was that input box, and grab its attribute value. So in other words, get the contents of the box. And then we said for this variable, we're going to say hello concatenated with the value of that text box. And then we're going to say go out to the DOM, go find the element that has the ID of output, and go to its inner HTML, which means the value in between the p tags, and assign it the value of that variable. So this is a way that you can actually work with objects that are created by the browser, and it's called the DOM, and you use the document get element by ID to get to it. Well, since these return string objects to those variables, that means that we can do something with it. And let's see what we can do. We'll go ahead and say soutput, and we're now going to say soutput is equal to sFirstName. Now remember, sFirstName was the contents of that box, but we created a string object, that's what that did, and stored it to that variable. Well, since it's a string object, it has attributes you can work with. And so what you can do is type in the name of the variable object and press period, and it says, here are some of the things that you can work with. Now, this isn't really that great because we're seeing more or less what the DOM wants to see. Meaning, it's thinking it's just an object from the DOM. So we're going to have to know some of these other functions or methods that we want to work with in JavaScript for a string object. And so let's see what those methods might be. Remember, in other videos, we worked with an array. Well, an array is an object, and an array has attributes and methods. For instance, one attribute was length. Let's see if we have the same thing here. Length. And so let's go ahead and save that. And let's run it. And let's do the following. Let's learn how to use the debugger while we're here. Here's my JavaScript. Press Control-Shift-I to access your source code that you're looking at. And let's type in Mickey, and then we're going to come over to here. Here's our source code, and I'm just going to click on one of the numbers that I want to work with. And so let's go ahead and just click on 7, and we can click even on 22, and these are what we call breakpoints, meaning that when we go and run our website, if it hits one of these lines that has a blue mark on it, it's going to pause the execution of that website. Let's see if it pauses it. So I said click me, paused in the debuggers. Here's the debugger, and you get to it looking at sources. And it says I'm on line 22 and I'm ready to execute it. Hasn't executed it yet. So over here on the right we have some little buttons. This says just run the program. This says go until you hit a function call. There's a function right there. This says step into the first line of the function. And this says step out of the function. You'll learn more about those when I make a video specifically on the debugger. And this says just go one line at a time, which is F9. Well, since I put another breakpoint there, I'm just going to click run, and it's going to run until it hits another breakpoint, and here I am. When I put my cursor on sFirstName, it says undefined, and that's because it hasn't executed this line yet. But look what happens when I put my cursor on document. It's actually showing me that the document has a whole bunch of things in it. Like it has a body tag, it has the active element currently is the button, that's the one that has focus. It's an HTML doc type. Let me put my cursor. I just put my cursor, I didn't click or anything. What are some other great things? Foreground color is empty. And I keep pulling off of there. Just put it on and don't click. Just put it over it. Hover over it. And we have a head section. In the head section, there's some information about the head section. Let's go back to the body and see what happens. If I go to the body section and expand that, it says, yeah, it has all this stuff associated with the body. And there's the client top, left, all those information, all those objects, those attributes associated with the body tag and all the events that it can respond to. So now I'm going to come over here. Remember, it was undefined. I'm going to click on step. That says execute that line. Now that I've executed the line, it went out to the document, went to the element, found the ID that had name 1, grabbed the value out of it, which was the box, and returned it back to the variable. So now it has the value of Mickey. Here, if I say Mickey dot length, length is an attribute, and it says it has a value of 6, and I can assign that to the variable, and then assign that variable, which if I click step, it now has a value of 6, and I can assign that to the inner HTML of the HTML tag that has the ID of output, which was that P tag right there. Let's go ahead and click this arrow, and it will just run the rest of the program since there's no other breakpoints. And it displays the value of 6. So you can see that the length allows you to go and grab how many characters there are associated with that string object. Well, what else can we do? Let's use the index of. This is a method, like a function. That's why you have to put parentheses on it. And what the index of does is it tells you the first occurrence of a specified string. So let's say we're going to go type something in, and let's see where the word BYU shows up in that string. Let's go ahead and save it, and we'll run it. So I'm going to type in I love BYU Cougars. And let's go ahead and Control-Shift-I. And we have those breakpoints already set. I clicked on them, and that removes the breakpoint. I'm just going to click on line 10. That will pause when we go to run. We run it. Here we are. S first name has I love BYU Cougars, and I'm going to look for BYU. F9 step. S output has a value of 7. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But remember, it's a string, and strings start at 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in the 7th position, which is really the 8th, the string BYU was found. Now, what if it wasn't found? Let's go ahead and continue to run. Come back over to here. Let's just put the word YOLO. Click me. And we pause once again. Let's do a step. S output is equal to -1. And that means it didn't find it. And remember, if you just want to keep running, you click on this little arrow right here. So -1. Index of says it will return the position where the string starts. If it doesn't find it, it will return a -1. Let's learn another method associated with strings, and that is called slice. The slice method says you can extract part of a string. You can tell it where to start and where to end. But notice the ending value is not included. Let's just do this. Instead of doing the document object for right now, let's just put I love BYU Cougars. And this says start at 7. Remember, that's 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's going to start here and go to 13 minus 1, because 13 is not inclusive. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we should get BYU space CO. Let's go ahead and save that and run it and see if the slice actually extracts a substring. And it doesn't really matter what we type in, because remember, we actually just hard-coded that value. Click me. The breakpoint is still set. And so now let's go ahead and step over that line. And it says BYU CO, because the slice says start at position 7, but remember it's 0 based, and go to position 13, but do not include 13. So really it says go to position 12 and return that string. Let's take a look at another function that we can use, and that's called substring. Substring's a lot like the slice method, but they accept different parameters. So instead of the word slice, we'll say substring. We still have the same parameters as 7 and 13, but remember 13 is not inclusive. But one thing different with the substring is we can just tell it where to start, and it will grab all the way to the end. So that means if we ran this, it should return BYU Cougars, because we start at position 7 and go to the end. Let's try that. And we'll run click me, and it says BYU Cougars. So the substring and the slice work very similar to each other, but if you leave the second parameter out on substring, it will go to the end of the string. Another one you could use is substr, and that returns a substring also. You tell it where to start and how many characters to extract. So this would start at 7 and pull back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it should return BYU space CO. Let's go ahead and try that and see if it works. BYU CO. And so substring differs in the fact that instead of specifying the last element, you want to pull back -1. You just say how many characters you want to pull back. Another thing we could do is we can convert to uppercase and lowercase. So let's do the following. Let's say that whatever we type in, we want it to all be uppercase. And you simply say the string variable dot to uppercase. And right now it is all uppercase, so let's make it lowercase. Some will be upper, some will be lower. Let's go ahead and save that and run it. And we should see all uppercase characters. However, it would help if we don't make typos. So let's go back over to our source code. Instead of the word cases, to uppercase. And let's run that one more time and see what happens. Makes it all uppercase. If we have 2 uppercase, we probably also have 2 lowercase. And let's go ahead, we'll just leave that the way it is. Let's see if it converts the word BYU to lowercase when we run this. And it did. So there's a lot of great functions, methods that you can use with strings. Another one we could do is, let's say we have a bunch of extra spaces in the front and the back, and we want this whole thing to be uppercase, and we want to get rid of the strings or the extra spaces. We can run what they call a trim. So we'll trim all of the uppercase of the string and assign it to a variable. So you can actually chain multiple string methods on one string object. And the way you do it is just simply put the period and the next method, and the period and the next method, just like that. So some of the functions you just learned, some of the methods are length and index of, substring, substr, to uppercase, to lowercase, trim. There's a bunch of them that you can still look at. Maybe go look at another one called replace. Go Google that. But strings are objects, and that means they have methods that allow us to do work. And they have attributes or properties, and those describe the object. And a string is an object. So if you have a string variable, that means you have access to all that code that somebody else already wrote for you, and you just have to learn how to use it. So how would you actually do that? Well, Google is your friend. So just do a JavaScript string class, and you can go and look at all the different things that strings offer you. For instance, here's the MSDN, Microsoft's technology, and they have a bunch of different methods they're showing there for strings. Those are all methods that you can call. Another thing you could do is look at W3 Schools, and they'll show you all the methods you can work with: length, index of, last index of, search, those are just some of them, slice, substring, substr, replace, to uppercase, to lowercase, concat, trim, charat. These are all methods that somebody wrote for that object. In fact, here's a great one. If you have a string like that, you can run the split command, searching for a character, and it will split that string into an array. So by the time you're done, txt would now be an array of 5 elements. So take a look at the string class in JavaScript and see the wonderful things you can do that somebody else already wrote for you. In fact, while we're here, let's go ahead and do that. Here, let's make a string, and we'll say Jazz Nuggets Thunder Blazers and T-Wolves. And we want to go ahead and say that S output is equal to S first name, which probably is a dumb variable name, dot, and we want to do a split, and we want to do a split on commas. Similar to what we had over here. We need to put it in quotes though, but we have our split dot commas. And so whatever you're looking for, maybe it's a space, and you could have done it with the space. So this will now create a loop or an array of variables. Let's do this now. For var iCount equals 0. As long as iCount is less than S output dot length, which is the length of the array, iCount plus plus, and let's just do an alert of S output bracket iCount. Let's really see if it's an array, and we won't worry about doing anything with that. We'll just comment that out, and let's go ahead and save that and run it, and let's see if that split really made an array from that string. If it did, then we should see some variables that are printing out. Jazz, Nuggets, Thunder, Blazers, T-Wolves. So that's a great way that you can take a string and turn it into an array, and I didn't even have to write any code. The string class is wonderful. There's methods that are written for it that you don't have to do anything, you just call them. And so spend some time and Google that string class and learn all the different things you can do with string objects.